Have you ever stopped to wonder why so many people feel lost in a crowd, drowning in the noise of everyone else's expectations? Why is it that, despite working harder than ever, we sometimes feel emptier than before? There's a powerful truth you need to hear today, one that will change the way you live, breathe, and move forward. It begins with this simple but often overlooked decision. Focus on yourself and stop giving too much. Now, don't misunderstand me. Giving is good, it's noble. But giving too much to the point where your own heart, your own dreams, and your own spirit become neglected, that's where the trouble starts. It's like pouring water from a cup that's already empty. How can you pour into others if you haven't first filled yourself? The Bible reminds us in Matthew 22:39 that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. Notice it says as ourselves, not more than ourselves. There is a balance, a boundary, a sacred space within your soul that must be preserved. When you focus too much on others, you lose sight of who God created you to be. You start living in reaction to what everyone else demands, instead of in response to the calling God placed on your life. And that calling is unique, it's personal, it's yours and yours alone. But how do you discover it? By turning inward, by setting healthy boundaries, by saying no when you need to say it, and by saying yes to your own growth, your own rest, your own healing. Think about Jesus. Even in the midst of his mission, he often withdrew to quiet places to pray, to recharge, to realign with the Father's purpose. If the Son of God needed moments of solitude and self-focus, how much more do you? The world will demand your attention, your energy, your compassion. But God calls you first to stewardship over your own life, to nurture your soul, to cultivate your gifts, to prepare yourself for the purpose only you can fulfill. So today, let this be the moment you decide to stop overextending your heart and start investing in your own well-being. Focus on what makes you whole. Focus on what makes your spirit thrive. When you do that, everything else will begin to fall into place. Your relationships will deepen, your work will flourish, and your peace will multiply. Remember, you cannot pour from an empty cup, but when your cup is full, it overflows not just to others, but back to you in ways that sustain and strengthen. Choose to be intentional. Choose to protect your time, your energy, your dreams. Choose to focus on yourself not selfishly, but wisely, because you are a masterpiece in the making, and the world desperately needs the fullness of what only you can give. Have you ever felt completely drained, like you've given everything you have to everyone around you, yet somehow inside there's nothing left? That's the danger of overgiving. It's subtle at first, almost noble, because you want to help, to serve, to love. But when you keep pouring out your time, your energy, your heart without pause, it begins to take a toll. Your spirit grows weary, your joy fades, and your sense of purpose becomes clouded. You may even find yourself asking, why do I feel so empty when I'm doing so much for others? This is the moment you must stop and listen closely. Overgiving without self-care is like running on an empty tank. It's impossible to keep going without breaking down. The Bible calls us to be good stewards of what God has entrusted to us, including our own bodies and souls. How can you serve with excellence if you are worn thin? How can your light shine bright if your flame is flickering low? God's design is for us to give, yes, but not at the expense of ourselves. We are called to love others as ourselves, which means recognizing our limits and honoring them. When you overextend yourself, you risk losing not just your strength, but also your joy and your testimony. So today, make a promise to yourself and to God. You will not pour out what you haven't first taken time to fill. Because when you care for yourself rightly, you are not just surviving. You are thriving, ready to bless others with a full and overflowing heart. There's a powerful truth you need to embrace. Self-care is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Often we think of caring for ourselves as selfish or indulgent, but nothing could be further from the truth. God calls us to stewardship, and that includes stewarding our own health, our emotions, our mind, and our spirit. If you neglect yourself, how can you stand strong to face the challenges ahead? How can you pour out love and encouragement to others when your own well runs dry? Imagine a lamp that's meant to light a whole room. If you never stop to refill the oil, eventually that light will flicker and go out. Your soul is like that lamp. Rest, reflection, nourishment. They are the oil that keeps your light burning bright. Taking time to care for yourself is an act of obedience to God's design for your life. It's recognizing that your well-being matters to Him, that He wants you to be whole and strong. When you prioritize self-care, you're not stepping away from your responsibilities. You're stepping into your God-given strength. You are replenishing your spirit so that you can love with authenticity, lead with clarity, and serve with endurance. This isn't about selfishness. It's about honoring the temple God has given you and preparing yourself to walk in the fullness of His purpose. So choose today to care for yourself intentionally, because you cannot give what you do not have. In this journey of life, learning to say no is one of the most powerful lessons you can ever grasp. It's not easy, because our hearts are wired to please, to serve, to be everything to everyone. But when you say yes to every demand, every request, every expectation, you risk losing yourself. Setting healthy boundaries isn't about shutting people out. It's about protecting the sacred space within you that God has given to nurture your purpose and your peace. Think about Jesus again. Even in His ministry, He knew when to withdraw from the crowd, when to step back from the pressing needs around Him, to pray, to rest, to refocus. That was His boundary, an intentional pause to guard His spirit. If the Son of God, fully devoted to His mission, recognized the necessity of boundaries, how much more do we need to honor them in our lives? Saying no doesn't make you unkind or uncaring. It makes you wise. It creates room for the things that truly matter, the things that align with God's calling on your life. It protects you from exhaustion and bitterness. It preserves your ability to give generously when it truly counts. When you learn to say no with grace and conviction, you're not closing doors. You're opening the door to your fullest potential and greatest impact. Boundaries are the guardrails of your soul's journey. Without them, you risk veering off the path God has set for you. With them, you walk confidently, knowing you're honoring both God's plan and your own well-being. There is a delicate balance. We often overlook the balance between loving others and loving ourselves. The Scripture clearly teaches us to love our neighbors as ourselves, which means we must first have a healthy love for who we are in God's eyes. This is not pride or selfishness. It is recognizing your value as a child of God, worthy of care, respect, and kindness. When you fail to love yourself, you diminish your ability to love others fully and authentically. Think about the very essence of love. Love that is stretched too thin, love that is given without boundaries, becomes wearied and weak. But love that springs from a heart that is nourished and secure in God's grace overflows abundantly. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot love deeply if you have not first experienced God's love for you and allowed that love to heal and strengthen you. Loving yourself means embracing your worth, forgiving your mistakes, and walking in the grace God extends to you every day. It means taking the time to nurture your soul, to listen to your needs, and to honor your journey. When you do this, you build a foundation that supports not just your life, but every relationship you hold dear. Because a heart grounded in God's love and secure in self-respect is free to love others without fear, without depletion, and without compromise. That's the kind of love the world needs, and that starts with the love you give to yourself. Every person who walks this earth has a unique calling placed upon their life by God, a purpose that only you can fulfill. But how often do we get so caught up in meeting the demands of others, in living out of obligation or comparison, that we lose sight of that divine purpose? The path to discovering your God-given calling begins not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet moments of reflection and surrender. When you focus inward, when you pause to listen to the still, small voice of God within your heart, that's when clarity begins to break through. It's in these moments that God reveals the gifts He's placed inside you, the passions, talents, and dreams uniquely tailored for His plan through your life. Don't allow yourself to be distracted by the expectations of others or by the fear of not measuring up. Your purpose is not defined by comparison, but by the unique fingerprint God has placed on your soul. Remember Jeremiah 29:11, where God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." That promise is for you. When you focus on yourself not in selfishness, but in seeking God's design, you begin to walk in the fullness of that hope and future. Your purpose is waiting, and it will only be found when you turn your attention inward and listen to God's voice above the clamor of the world. Even in the busiest seasons of His ministry, Jesus made it a priority to withdraw, to step away from the crowds, the demands, the constant noise, and seek moments of solitude with the Father. These were not moments of weakness, but of strength and renewal. He understood that in order to carry out His mission with clarity and power, He needed times of quiet reflection and prayer. This example is a powerful reminder for us today. If the Son of God needed rest and renewal, how much more do we? In the midst of your responsibilities and the pressures that pull at your heart, God invites you to find those quiet places where you can reconnect, recharge, and realign with His purpose. Solitude is not isolation. It is intentional time spent nurturing your spirit, a sacred space where distractions fall away and God's voice can be heard more clearly. It is in these moments that you find strength for the journey, peace amidst the chaos, and guidance for the next step. Jesus' example teaches us that rest and reflection are not optional. They are vital. Without them, our souls grow weary, and our vision becomes blurred. But when you make space for solitude, you invite God's presence to refresh your heart and mind, preparing you to return to your calling with renewed passion and focus. Don't underestimate the power of stepping away to come back stronger, wiser, and more aligned with God's plan for your life. In the whirlwind of life's demands, it's easy to lose sight of how precious your time and energy truly are. Every moment, every ounce of strength you have is a gift from God, a resource that must be guarded with great wisdom. When you allow your time to be consumed by distractions, trivial pursuits, or endless obligations that don't align with your purpose, you are slowly but surely drifting away from the path God has set before you. Intentionality is the key. To live with purpose means to carefully choose where you invest your hours and energy, knowing that what you give your attention to grows stronger. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Ephesians to redeem the time, because the days are evil. This means making conscious decisions to say yes to what matters and no to what steals your focus and drains your soul. Guarding your time and energy is not selfish. It is an act of obedience. It's saying to God, "I want to be faithful with what you have entrusted to me." When you protect these gifts, you create space for what truly matters. Relationship with God, nurturing your soul, pursuing your calling, and loving those He places around you. It's in this intentional living that you find freedom, not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to do what matters most with excellence and joy. Choose wisely where your energy flows, for that choice shapes your destiny. Life's journey is not just about moving forward, it's about growing and healing along the way. Too often, we push ourselves to keep going without pausing to address the wounds and weariness that weigh down our spirits. But God's design for you includes wholeness, a restoration that comes when you intentionally focus on your personal growth and healing. Growth requires humility, the willingness to look honestly at your life, to acknowledge your struggles, and to invite God's transforming power into those places that need change. Healing requires patience, because restoration is not always immediate, but a process that unfolds over time as you lean on God's grace. When you make space for this journey, you begin to shed the burdens of past mistakes, disappointments, and pain that hold you back. The psalmist declares, He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. This is God's promise to you, a promise that no matter how deep your hurt, His healing hand is ready to mend your soul. Focusing on yourself means embracing this truth. You are worthy of that healing, and you are called to grow into the fullness of who God created you to be. As you invest in your growth and healing, you don't just survive, you thrive. You become stronger, wiser, and more resilient, prepared to walk boldly into your future. This process fuels your ability to serve others, not out of obligation, but out of abundance. Let God's healing be the foundation on which your purpose is built, and watch how He turns your brokenness into a beautiful testimony of His grace. There is a profound spiritual principle at work when it comes to giving and receiving. When your heart is full, it overflows. You see, God designed us not just to survive, but to live abundantly, to pour out blessings onto others from the overflow of His grace in our lives. But that overflow only happens when we are first filled. When you neglect yourself, when your spirit is empty, there is simply nothing left to give. Consider the well. If you never refill the well, eventually the water runs dry. But when you take time to draw fresh water, the well becomes a source of life not just for you, but for everyone around you. This is how God wants your life to be, a wellspring of hope, love, and encouragement that flows freely because you have been renewed and strengthened in Him. When your cup is full, when you have taken the time to focus on your own soul, your own healing, and your own growth, then your giving becomes powerful and transformative. It's no longer a draining task but a joyous overflow. Others will feel the difference because your love is authentic, your encouragement is sincere, and your strength is contagious. This is God's design for your life. He doesn't want you to give out of emptiness, but out of abundance. So invest in yourself. Fill your heart with His presence, and watch as your life becomes a fountain of blessings that refreshes and uplifts everyone you encounter. This overflow is the evidence of a life fully surrendered to God's grace and purpose. To live with purpose and intention means to wake up each day knowing that your time, your energy, and your very life are not accidents but sacred gifts from God. It means that you are called to steward these gifts wisely, protecting your well-being as an act of faithfulness to the mission God has placed before you. When you guard your heart and your soul, you are making a deliberate choice to walk in alignment with God's plan, rather than drifting aimlessly through the demands of the world. Purposeful living requires discernment, discerning what aligns with God's will and what distracts you from it. It means prioritizing what matters most and letting go of what does not serve your calling. Every choice you make shapes your destiny, so living with intention is not just about doing more. It's about doing what matters with excellence and focus. God has uniquely equipped you for a reason. Your gifts, your experiences, your story, they all play a vital role in His kingdom. Protecting your well-being is not an act of selfishness, but an act of obedience, because God wants you whole, thriving, and ready to fulfill your destiny. When you live intentionally, you are not merely existing, you are advancing God's purpose on the earth with clarity, passion, and endurance. This is the life God desires for you, a life marked by purpose, protected by wisdom, and powered by His grace.